What is up? Welcome back to another edition of Talkin' Ball. It is Monday, August 29th, week 0 of college football. First weekend of college football in the books, if you could really call it that. Didn't feel like a college football Saturday, waking up. This one, upcoming Saturday, I'll be at Ohio State, Notre Dame. I think that's going to feel decidedly different waking up this Saturday. But quick rewind to last weekend, because a little story from Neil Hornsby, founder of PFF, had his retirement party last Thursday night. Peter King didn't end up making it. We actually talked about on the pod that he was supposed to be here. Couldn't end up making it for one reason or another. Sent in a video that was pretty funny to watch. But why weren't you there, Quinn?
Yeah, a little bit of a COVID scare, not gonna lie. I mean, that's still a thing, I guess, unfortunately. But yeah, girlfriend was not feeling well, fever, chills, whole thing. So took a couple tests, everything's fine. But figured probably wasn't the best idea to come to a party where there's gonna be like hundreds of people there. So just kind of being a responsible. I'm a company man.
That is very responsible
company man,
and also very like a retirement party, nonetheless.
Yeah,
where it's like those are not.
That's your retirement gift. Like,
exactly.
Hey, thanks, for everything. Here, here's a disease.
But
we were not there, so it's all good.
It was a pretty good time. We kind of blew it out. They did on the rooftop here at the PFF offices. Austin Gale was talking over the loudspeaker just in his normal voice the whole time. It was pretty impressive. But I got the initial invite for it, went out in a company Slack like a month ago. I saw it, I put it on my calendar, didn't think twice about it. Apparently, they sent an updated invite the day before that had the dress code, which was dress casual on it. I never saw that because I don't really check the company Slacks too much because I don't really, to be honest, care all that much. I kind of stay in my own lane here and do the draft stuff and do my podcast, and then I go to work and I head home. But apparently it was dress casual. I show up because I walked there because I live like about a mile away from the office. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to walk, and it's a little hot. So I show up wearing my yoga shorts and a God Country Notre Dame shirt that's like an athletic shirt, and I walk up, first person I see is Steve Palazzolo in a full suit outside of the office, and I know I had fucked up. Looked like I was wearing swim trunks, honestly. They were my yoga shorts. It was rough because everyone's wearing dress to the nines. The good news is, though, probably the second least dressed person there was Neil Hornsby. He was just wearing a T-shirt. So for his own retirement party, I didn't feel that out of place, but it was little egg on the face moment for me. But I digress. Let's get into the Talkin' Ball segment here. We got Talkin' Ball. We got the Freaks List on tap. We got Bruce Feldman, interview with him after we talk about the Freaks List. We got the rookie stock report, going to go through a lot of the rookies who impressed me, who maybe needs a little bit more seasoning at this point in time. And then we're going to get to your guys' mailbag questions at the end of the show. So let's talk some ball. And the first Talkin' Ball is a little housekeeping news. PFF now has an app on the Apple App Store. Go check it out. PFF. It might say, did you mean PDF? No, you meant PFF, Pro Football Focus. We have a new app. It is, as George Chahuri likes to say, as bad as it will ever be right now. Only going to get better.
Though.
What's that?
It's still sick.
It is still sick.
It's a good app.
It is.
It's a legitimately good app. And we will probably, if I'm not mistaken, maybe not today, but definitely for Thursday's episode, we'll probably have some sort of little promo for you podcast listeners regarding the app. Don't exactly have it finalized yet, but we will. So go check that out.
There we go. A little promo for you guys. Nice. But it is real slick. It is probably the best public facing thing we've created. PFF Ultimate's the best thing PFF's ever created, but this is the best public facing thing. This is the best thing you guys can get that we've ever created. A lot of man hours have gone into this, and it is pretty sick. So go ahead, download that in the App Store. Now, it says some other actual, maybe NFL news. I don't even know if you can call this actual NFL news. Tom Brady returned with no explanation whatsoever. He comes back from, week plus long hiatus and tweets out about his clothing brand is the only first thing he tweets back, that he was shooting for his clothing brand when it definitely wasn't him in the video he tweets out. So, Quinn, you want to run the clip of what he said at the podium?
It's all personal. Everyone's got different situations they're dealing with, so we all have really unique challenges to our life, and, I'm 45 years old, man. There's a lot of shit going on, so, you just got to try to figure out life the best you can, and, it's a continuous process, so.
So I don't really even care what he said. And now maybe there was some real pressing reason that he had to go, some family issue, whatever, undisclosed that we're not privy to and shouldn't be privy to, honestly. But it looks like he got more plastic surgery. I'm just going to say it. His face in that video.
I was going to ask you that. I didn't know that you had that take prepped, but that's like the big rumor going around.
Like his
that he had it scheduled and he's like, oh shit, like I got to get it. And takes 11. I don't know how long recovery from plastic surgery takes, but I feel like the timetable kind of checks out.
I mean, he's already like, it's well documented. If you just look at his rookie photo in the NFL, how much his jawline has changed. And what's it, like his cheekbones now are fucking like protruding out of his face. He looks like handsome Squidward was the meme going around about him. And it's true. I mean, he looks absolutely like a caricature of a 45-year-old man.
I love Tom Brady, but he is like dangerously approaching Dane Cook territory. Have you seen Dane Cook?
Yeah.
Like maybe not that bad because he's a pro athlete, but, you know, he's in better shape, but like we're kind of, I mean, you can mention him in the same sentence. And like I said, I love Tommy, but that's not a great spot to be.
But it is a slippery slope, man. That's what you see it happen all the time. Hollywood. Once you're a little upset with something about yourself, you probably, and Tom Brady, the ultimate competitor, he's probably not going to change until he thinks it's perfect. And when you're that kind of competitor, it's never going to be perfect. So you're always going to be chasing. And Tommy, I think it's time to hang it up. Hang up the scalpel. You don't need it anymore. It was already looking like, for a 45-year-old man, he was already looking pretty damn good. Now starting to get into dangerous territory. Other news at the quarterback front, Geno Smith named the starter for the Seattle Seahawks. And with good reason. I was impressed with what Geno Smith did this preseason. He looked legitimately good. Now, last year, I think with Seattle was probably the best we've seen him look. And that wasn't great, but like you could tell that a corner had kind of been turned at this point in his career. You know, the game had sort of slowed down. A lot of the panicky, ugly sort of bad decisions we saw from him. Obviously, that marred his time with the Jets and the Giants. Like that, they weren't as bad last year. And now that's not to say, again, that he was playing high level, but there were some throws on his tape this preseason. He had 5 big-time throws. He led all quarterbacks this preseason with 5 that were very impressive. I was very impressed with his poise, too. Had a few plays under pressure that, again, just like weren't kind of the guy we saw from him early on, to where Seahawks might not be the worst team in the NFL is kind of what I'm getting at here. They're still, I don't think anyone's picking them to make any noise even, whatever you think that phrase means, because make some noises falls into the fun to watch category of meaningless statements. But I do think that Geno Smith, with that receiving core, if these rookie offensive tackles play well, could actually have a good year. I'll say it. I'm sold based off of what he put on tape this preseason. Like I said, 88.0 overall grade in the preseason. Some other moves around the NFL. Trey Flowers, former highest paid defensive end in the NFL at one point, I believe. Now to the Dolphins. Dude was making $19 million a year at one point with the Detroit Lions. Injuries over the last 2 years, broke his arm in 2020, had a knee injury in 2021. So he faltered to a 63.2 in an injury hampered year, but he's only 29 years old. And again, this was at one point a guy who was paid top dollar from Detroit Lions. And there wasn't a lot of pushback because he was playing that caliber of football. To me, there were only a handful of free agents left at this point in time that I legitimately thought could make an impact on a roster. Eric Fisher being one of them, Will Fuller, Odell, whenever he gets healthy, Antonio Brown, if, maybe not a positive impact on a roster, but an impact on a roster. I'm still a Landon Collins believer. If he wants to switch to linebacker, I think he could still play. Not probably an NFL safety at this point in time, but Trey Flowers is one of the guys I thought, if is signed, now it's not going to be for a lot of money, can still make an impact. So going to the Dolphins, I think it's a good move for them. And again, it's not going to cost them a lot. So fan of that. Only strengthens my plus 450 Dolphins bet. I mean, only looking better by the day, even though Tua got crushed for the throw that he completed to Tyreek Hill, by the way, the 60-plus yarder through the air. He completed it. Yeah, it was underthrown, but still, a completion is a completion.
Not to be confused with Bengals, Trey Flowers.
Yes.
Just to, the tight end eraser that came in and helped solidify one of these, a little AFC Championship, a little Super Bowl berth. Not the same guy.
Oklahoma State legend, Trey Flowers. This
correct.
is Arkansas legend, Trey Flowers.
Correct.
Last couple pieces of housekeeping here of talking ball. Had to bring this one up after how we started the show last week. Kayvon Thibodeau with the MCL last week on the cut block. Exact same cut block coming across the formation on split zone. Takes TJ Watt out the game yesterday. No, TJ Watt, why is he playing in the third preseason game? You can ask that question. But apparently not a serious injury. You know what's coming, though, after this. 2 weeks in a row, same block, 2 knee injuries. And now, again, TJ Watt's not supposed to be serious. Probably make it back for the regular season, week 1. I think that block's about to be gone. If we saw it come with offensive linemen, was that last year, where the cut blocks to the edge were gone from defenders, cornerbacks, cutting down offensive linemen. 2 injuries, 2 weeks. That one's coming up to competition committee next offseason. And I think we've seen the last of the tight ends coming across formation and cutting. It's going to have to be a high block after this. I would bet good money on that being the case. Last piece of housekeeping here. Nebraska, Northwestern. Nebraska obviously falls. Scott Frost, week 0 loss yet again to a Big Ten opponent. And my favorite, Northwestern's offensive line coach trolling Nebraska afterwards, tweeted out, and to think we only puked 4 times all camp. After Scott Frost was bragging that 10 to 15 pukes a practice. That's how hard they've been practicing at Nebraska, which sounds wildly dangerous to any person with an ounce of sanity. And yeah, didn't end up working out for them. Northwestern.
He beat me to it. I was going to make a puking joke.
Yeah. I mean,
he got me.
I love, there needs to be more coach trash talk than there is. I mean, there's always a lot of player trash talk on the social media sphere. I want coaches coming after other coaches. You don't see enough of that. I just think it's an untapped resource that.
I mean, I feel like in college, that's like that can only help with recruiting.
Right?
Unless you're a bad trash talk. Like if you're a good trash talker, like Lane Kiffin kind of does it.
I get it. And that's why he's fucking Kiffin, dude. That's why people had the heel turn to like one of the most beloved coaches in America. And because he's the trash talk, because he's the guy on Twitter making the jokes. There's a market for that. And I think it's only going to get more realized in the coming years by, forward-thinking coaches. All right, let's get to Bruce Feldman's Freaks List. Bruce, I praise him every single year for this article. It is a godsend for a draft evaluator like myself just to get an early kind of sneak peek on who are going to be the guys. Who are going to be the guys that blow up the combine next spring. We get into it. We get into kind of his how he does it, like how he formulates this list in a little bit and go deeper on some guys. But I wanted to get to like, who are the actual best players from this list? Who are the actual top prospects to want? So I wrote an article for PFF.com. Go find it. Go find it in the PFF app called The Top 20 Prospects from Bruce Feldman's Freaks List. So they're actually, of the 100 Freaks List players, there were 20 that made the PFF Top 100 big board. So there's a lot of NFL draftable talent. Like a lot of times being a high-end athlete and being a high-end NFL prospect go hand in hand. Number 1 player on Bruce Feldman's Freaks List was Mazi Smith, who did not make the top 50 on PFF's draft board. Was not much of a top prospect, only earned 75.6 overall grade last season. Going to need to see more from him, but his numbers are insane. I mean, he did 325 pounds 22 times in the bench press. He had initially had him as a 44-inch vertical, and it ended up being only a 33-inch vertical, but that's still insane for a 337-pound man. A 6'9", 5'3" cone, which Michigan's apparently figured out how to do the 3-cone. They have a cheat code with what Aiden Hutchinson, Kwity Paye, and now Mazi Smith are reportedly doing. Yeah, I don't know what's going on in the strength program there. I'm, as a Notre Dame fan, I'm willing to say it's probably PEDs that is the responsible for this, but 3 straight years they've had either number 1 or number 2 in Michigan. That program's churning out some athletes, especially on the defensive line of scrimmage. And the other one I want to touch on here, you guys go check out the whole list online before I get to the top prospects from it, but Marvin Harrison Jr. at number 2. Obviously, as a draft analyst, I haven't watched a ton of underclassmen. I only so much time in the day. But when I saw him at number 2 on this list and his numbers here, 6'3", 206, bench 380, 22 reps at 225, 394 short shuttle, 10.9 broad jump, 23 miles per hour in the GPS. Like, those are insane numbers for a big wide receiver. He is not just a track star. This is a legit physical presence. And I flipped on his tape and I was like, this is not a freshman. This guy is unbelievable that guy was riding the pines, obviously because you had, 10th and 11th overall picks on your roster. And a guy who's probably going to be in that range next year in Geno Smith and Jigba. But my God, like Marvin Harrison might be the best wide receiver in the country. It was to do what he did as a freshman, or just put what he put on tape as a freshman. As a Notre Dame fan, I'm upset. Like I'm upset that is even possible. So yeah, Marvin Harrison Jr. He will be not 2023 draft because he's obviously only a true sophomore. 2024 draft, you're talking about top 5 to 10 pick. I'd put him in that category right away. All right, top prospects that are actually draft eligible here. The top prospect on Freaks list, this guy, if you like Trayvon Walker, who a lot of people did, you went number 1 overall, you're going to love Myles Murphy. Very similar, the Clemson defensive end, not the North Carolina defensive end, because they are 2 guys named Myles Murphy, and the North Carolina defensive end is probably a draftable prospect in his own right as well. But Clemson defensive ends, 5th on the PFF draft board, 3rd on the Feldman's Freaks list, and my Lord, dude, 6'5", 275. Already you're thinking, power end. Already like that size is very NFL translatable. Deadlifts 505, benches 405, 35-inch vertical, 10-foot broad jump, and a 4.5, high 4.5s in the 40. Those are, he could go 4.7 in the 40. And if he puts up those other numbers, it's insane for a guy that size. And again, I said why he's 5th on PFF draft board is like, those aren't even, I guess the bench press is, but like his strength, like how powerful he is, just being able to move guys for a sophomore, for a freshman. He had the highest run defense grade in the country as a true freshman. Like this guy, I'm very excited to see what he and the guy who's number 2 on this list of top prospects on the Freaks list, Bryan Bresee, who's 6th on the PFF draft board, 14th on the Freaks list. Defensive tackle. I'm excited to see what they do without Brent Venables, honestly, because Venables, pioneer in the defensive space. His defense has always been ahead of the curve, but kind of the way it's been trending ever since, I guess it was 18. So ever since the Cleveland Furl line that had Furl and Christian Wilkins, Dexter Lawrence, ever since that one, they've been so blitz heavy and stunt heavy that they're not really maximizing. They're not like how Ohio State just lets their D-line cook and get one-on-ones and then just do whatever it takes to get after the passer. That's not Clemson. You flip on this guy's tape and it's difficult to really see what they can do as pass rushers because of that. I do wonder with the talent they now have along this defensive line, because they got a ton on that Clemson line, if we see them sort of go back to that where it's a lot of more 4 down, more just let that D-line create on their own, because they got the horses to do it. But there are a lot of smart, like Kirby Smart, Georgia. They're in the same sort of realm of these defenses that aren't just letting their D-line attack. They're trying to create this controlled chaos up front with their linebackers being as likely to come after the passer as a lot of their defensive linemen, and just realizing that, hey, we can win one-on-ones, but I'd rather get a free runner. And if I could scheme up free runners without kind of compromising my defense, the sim pressures where you're still rushing forward, but one of them is like an off-ball linebacker, that you're in a better spot than, however long it takes for your dude to win a one-on-one. So interested to see what Clemson will do. But yeah, Bresee at 310 pounds, ran in the high 4.7s. Now maybe we got a little juiced up watch at Clemson. And I talked with Bruce about that, of which coaches, which strength coaches are we believing here and which ones aren't we? But you just look at this guy. He was the number 1 overall recruit back in 2020. He's 310 pounds and not a gut on him. I feel like anytime you see a guy that large, who does not look that large, does not look like he should be weighing 310 pounds, it's always impressive. And those guys tend to be your better football players. So number 3 on PFF's draft board, or number 3 on this list of top prospects on the Freaks list, is Kelee Ringo, who's top 10 on both PFF draft board and the Freaks list. Again, good combo to have as a prospect. He's 8th on PFF's draft board with 6th on the Freaks list, but he's 6'2", 215 at cornerback for Georgia. I mean, that already sort of conjures up, Patrick Peterson as comps, Jamel Dean sort of comps, where those guys have success. The guys who are that big and then low 4.3s. He ran a 10.4 300 meter in high school. Kelee Ringo did. That's just a very good combo because you don't get beat deep a lot. And when you're not going to get beat deep because you have that sort of inbuilt, obviously that speed advantage and that size advantage over pretty much every wide receiver you're going against, you can take a lot more chances. You're just playing an easier game at the cornerback position than the 5'10", 185 pounders of the world who run 4.5s. Your life's easier. It's like how the game works. So yeah, Kelee Ringo, a lot of people CB1s, PFF CB1 at the moment, feel pretty safely he's going to be a first rounder when we start doing our first round lock segment after next week. All right, number 4 on this list of top prospects on the Freaks list, we got Andre Carter from Army, who will be joining the podcast. He's ranks 11th on the PFF draft board. He ranks 13th on the Freaks list. And this was not a guy who, coming out of high school, Connecticut's Cheshire Academy, took a, what is that called? What's it called? The year after high school where prep year. Took a prep year, which
to go backpacking in Europe.
I could have taken a prep year himself. In retrospect. Mm-hmm. I could use a prep year right now. Yeah. It was not, I don't think he was discovering himself in it. He was just probably going and lifting weights in Connecticut at a prep school. But he came to Army 230, now 260, and he's agile as can be. 4.2 pro agility is the only number they give here to justify his 13th ranking. But when you're a guy who's 6'7", 260, I don't a 4.2 pro agility is out of this world. And that's why I'm so high on him, is that he can cross the face of opposing offensive tackles so easily. And then we combine that with 35-inch arms because he's long as hell. You put that combination together, and that's tough for offensive linemen. That quick with that kind of length. Yeah, I think he's going to be, and I said this to him, Army's first rounder since 1948. Been a min. They haven't had a lot of drafted guys in general, but yeah, Andre Carter, special dude. Number 5 on this list, TCU wide receiver Quentin Johnson. Comes in 21st on the PFF draft board, 23rd on the Freaks list. I know Connor Rogers, the Stock Exchange guys, I think he had him as wide receiver 1 in the upcoming class with good reason. He's 6'4", 210, and has a 42-inch vertical and 11-foot broad jump. That is a good combination. This is a guy who broke a ton of tackles, has broken a ton of tackles over the course of his career already. Very difficult to bring down after the catch. I'm really high on him. Again, not produced a ton because, well, he goes to TCU, and obviously their passing offense is pretty not great. Only 634 yards all last season. But, man, you flip on the tape, and he's so explosive off the line of scrimmage, so explosive out of his cuts that I think you're willing to forgive some production concerns. And the crazy thing is 26 broken tackles on his career and 55 catches. That rate is, for a freshman, sophomore, that rate would be insane if you were playing in the FCS. But he's not. I mean, he's playing in the FCS version of the Power 5 in terms of defensive talent. But I really don't care what level of competition is. That is an insane rate of broken tackles. And it's not like he's getting pump screens either. So Quentin Johnson, going to be a hashtag fun to watch all-star when it's all said and done with what he puts on tape. Can't wait to see what he does this upcoming season. All right, you want to go check out the full list of those guys, go to pff.com and do so. Or go to theathletic.com and support Bruce's work. I know I am a proud Athletic.
I'll throw the links in the description.
Links are in the description.
Just check down low.
Perfect. All right. Easy enough. Let's toss it, though, to Bruce Feldman because we talk about a bunch of these guys on that. And talk about his freaks list and a little bit of college football talk as well. Here it is, Bruce. I am joined now by Bruce Feldman, college football reporter of Fox Sports and The Athletic, and we're going to talk freaks list because it is my favorite article that drops all year long. I reference it, podcast listeners will know, on a weekly basis, pretty much. I may be the biggest freaks list fan there is. I reference it, like I said, all the time, and it pains me yet again to talk about Michigan at the top. How do they keep doing this? How does the Michigan Wolverines keep getting 3 straight years now? They've had either number 1 or number 2 player on your list. What is Ben Herbert, the strength coach, doing there that no one else in college football seems to be able to replicate?
Well, I think it helps. By the way, thanks for what you said. I really do appreciate it. I think it helps that they are one of those schools, and there's probably a handful, 15 of them, that recruit at a really high level, certainly. So he's working. Last year, Aiden Hutchinson was number 2 on my list. Before that, Kwity Paye. A lot of D-line guys, to be honest. Aiden Hutchinson, Kwity Paye, Rashawn Gary, who everybody, tried to recruit a few years back before that. And I was really talking to Ben initially. And by the way, he has a track record. He had been at Wisconsin before that. We know some of the developmental guys who turn out to be big-time stars out of there. So it was interesting. Well, I was really talking about Julius Welshoff, who is a little bit Aiden Hutchinson-like in terms of size and great change of direction, but in some regards, very different from Aiden Hutchinson, and that Aiden Hutchinson has been already really, really productive, as opposed to Welshoff is more of a developmental guy. Hutchinson, second-generation football player. His dad was obviously a great player at whereas Welshoff was a champion mogul skier in Germany. And so some of that skiing background, amazing, kind of unheard of level of lower leg flexibility. And so I was talking to one of the players in their program, DJ Turner, who's the fastest guy in the program. I said, what's the most amazing thing you've ever seen Julius do? And he started talking about this ankle flexibility test. And honestly, we've all gone to the gym or have been in the gym, and you know what a bench press is, you know what a vertical jump is, like most people who are probably watching this know what a good time or a good pound, performance is. Ankle flexibility, that's a different one for me, at least. And so I said, well, what did you score? And he goes, well, most people get like 12. I think I got 13 or 14. I said, what did he get? He goes, he got like 23. So just, it was so unheard of, the difference. So I reached out to some of the Michigan strength coaches I knew, and then Ben and I got in this conversation. And, Welshoff was he's in my top 10. But the more we talked, it was Mazi Smith. And I was like, I knew he was a really good player, and he's been there for a while. I didn't know he's gone from like 315 to 337, and he's got incredible strength and incredible explosiveness. And the more we talk, and then he sent me a bunch of videos. We ran a couple with the story. There's a couple other ones that we weren't going to run all the videos. Just kind of amazing power and strength. And I was like, geez, I think I may have this is going to be my number 1 guy. Whereas I thought it might be Miles Murphy or Marvin Harrison Jr. from Ohio State. And then I was like, after all the Smozzy stuff started coming in, I was like, some of these things are like unheard of, to bench 3 and 3.25 for 22 reps. I mean, to be honest, if he did 2.25 for 22 reps, that's not bad, but 100 pounds more. And then all the other stuff he was doing, how explosive he is, 33-inch broad jump, 33-inch vertical jump, and all these other things. And then the detail things, I was like, all right, here's my number 1 guy. It wasn't even that much of a decision after I thought about it more.
So when that article initially dropped, you had Mazi actually with a 44-inch vertical.
Oh my God.
How much like pushback did you get on that? Because when I saw that, I was just like, that is the fakest number I've ever, that just can't be possible.
It can't be true. Yeah. So a couple of little confessions here. So the mission, last week we did a family trip in Florida. I'm based in Los Angeles. So it's, we're on East Coast time, and I was trying to get these videos processed that I got from a lot of schools and strength coaches. And it was a little bit of a rough process to get it, for them to get it, and for, whatever. So I was up till late at night, and the Athletic said, hey, can you tweet out this thing at basically 4 a.m. Pacific? And I was like, sure. And I get the link and, I'm scrambling and it goes up and I see a couple of retweets and I'm literally in like the hotel bathroom, like basically on the sink area working because everybody else in my hotel room is my family and they're asleep. And I noticed somebody go, it's 2022. And I was like, oh boy. And I realized I was like unveiling the 2021 freaks. And I was like, yeah, that wasn't good. And then there was a couple other typos and that was one. I think there was another one that was maybe on the other side where it was like somebody was actually more impressive than the typo. But when I saw the Mozzie one, I was like, ooh, that's mine. I got to fix that. So, but then some of the other numbers are just so crazy. So I think it's just, I appreciate the people who are kind of like, okay, you may want to double check this one.
Michigan also had, and I hate that I keep harping on Michigan, but they also had a true freshman on the list. Kenneth Grant, defensive tackle, 6'4", 360, running sub 540. I can't remember any true freshmen. Was this the first time you've included a guy who hasn't played a collegiate snap before?
No, there's been a couple of guys who were in the past who were, like, I'm glad you said it the way you did. There were a couple of guys who actually were mid-year early enrollees. They were there. Okay. They might have gone through spring ball or whatever, but then I had a few. And so what was weird about that one was I ran into Jim Harbaugh in Indianapolis at Big Ten Media Days and had a pretty good conversation with him for 20 minutes. And he started talking about Kenneth Grant. And I knew the name, but I don't he was a 3-star D-line recruit from Indiana. And I think he had probably more big school interest than usually maybe some 3-star guys have. And so I asked some people, and then, the video we had of him to be 360 to move like he does is insane. And Herbert was like, if he keeps working, he will be probably the number one guy on your list down the road. Ooh. It's just like, Harbaugh was really effusive in what he saw from this kid. He was like, he's a gift from the gods.
Have you ever felt like when, talking to a coach, talking to the strength coach, whatever, that like they were lying to you about a number, that they really maybe gassing their guys up and that it really wasn't quite accurate at the time?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question because sometimes, like I've been doing this thing for 20 years. And so, some of the schools where it's like, all right, I'm going to take maybe this with a grain of salt. And honestly, my metric on this is what do they do when they go to either their, to the pro day, or what do they do when they go to the combine? Because, a long time ago, it's probably like 12 years ago, I had Margus Hunt from SMU, my number one guy. He was a champion track athlete and super, super explosive. And nobody could believe the numbers. And then he went to Indy and he almost matched him, to the 100th of a second. And so, people saw like last year, Aiden Hutchinson, his change of direction numbers were insane. That's what he did, a lot of that stuff was, he's the second pick of the draft. He would have probably been the first pick of the draft if his arms were longer, right? Or something. But so you see like Penn State had some crazy numbers, but then like the Mike Gesicki's and the Saquons, and I'm blanking on their safety from a few years back. Like they've had guys who've gone there. Micah Parsons, you don't, like my daughter could see, ooh, Micah Parsons is different just watching him on the field. They had, oh man, I'm blanking on the Ravens first round pick last year.
Odafe
Crazy
Owe,
fast.
Journey Brown.
Yeah, Jason Owe, whose first name is different. Odafe Owe, who just crazy fast. Mm-hmm. Went and did it at the pro day. So, I've kind of learned who I can probably have a little more faith in than who I maybe I'd be a little more skeptical of. But, as you said, Michigan, their track record has been strong on those guys who really backed it up.
So you are like, when guys go to the NFL combine or their pro days, you're keeping track. You're like, hey, I got this guy, said who ran a 4.29, runs a 4.45. We're gonna have to take that with a grain of salt next time. Yeah,
there's a few that are a little bit where I'm like, I want to see this one kind of thing. Yeah. But then there's others, like our top 5 guy on my list was DJ Johnson. And I've heard about him for years. He started out of Miami and then he transferred to play for Mario Cristobal at Oregon. Heard about him a lot. And then when I saw the number that I got from the coaching staff at Oregon, I was like, wow, this guy, I don't know what he weighs now, because I know he was 270. And they said he ran almost 23 miles per hour. 23 miles per hour is fast for a receiver or a DB who would weigh 170 pounds. That's still moving. And the idea that he hit that speed. And then so I talked to Dan Lanning numerous times. He's like, he's actually 6'4", 275 now. He's even bigger. The issue with him is, has he been able to stay healthy? But and then I was down in South Florida last week. I talked to Mario Cristobal a little bit in depth about him, and same thing. It's like no one questions, what kind of, size, speed this guy has. He's legit. It's just keeping him on the field.
How many schools are out there reaching out to you? And have you seen an uptick in it? Because marketing and putting your program out there in social media and that sort of thing has become the new wave in college football, and how to get, maximize your recruiting prowess, nationwide. Are you seeing an uptick in schools reaching out to you? And are there a lot that are really trying to get their guys on this list?
I am seeing an uptick. Would make it seem like last year. I feel like in the last maybe 3 years, 4 years, I've seen a much more open, for coaches, for head coaches, for other coaches to be responsive.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still reaching out to most of them. Now there's a handful who will be like, hey, you need to take a look at so-and-so. The other thing that's been really awesome, and I think because I became a sideline reporter, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago now. And so I'd be on the field before the games. Well, who else is on the field before the games is NFL scouts.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have these conversations. We would talk about players who were on there, and, they were incredibly, kind. It was flattering to hear some of the reactions. And so from there, I started reaching out to a lot of NFL people, because even there's a handful of schools, and I mean, it's probably, I can count them on one hand, who I know are probably not going to be very responsive to cooperate in this. And so for a couple of these schools, I really lean on the NFL people who've been in the building or have the conversations to tell me what they get. And, I'm thankful, a handful of guys who put on, certainly Jim Nagy and his crew from the Senior Bowl, they've been awesome. The resources, Eric Galco has,
mm-hmm.
A lot of these guys are really good at canvassing players that we, or at least, college football fans may not be watching on Saturdays, because they're FCS, they're Division II players. I mean, Jim especially, I talked to him maybe 5 days before this thing ran for about 2.5 hours. We have these long calls, and they're great because even if they're not necessarily freaks list guys, I'm able to pick his brain on what they think of people. And he's so sharp with his intel on players. But I'd never heard of the offensive lineman from Quincy University. I'd never even heard of Quincy University, until he was like, you may want to check. And then, so that was Saturday morning. And I think I did a bunch of calls, and he was like, I got back to him. I was like, hey, by the way, I heard this, and this, and it was like, there's, another guard at Chattanooga, and he's a really good player. And thanks to Jim for that one too. It was just, and then it works out like Galco and I were talking. I think it was he was the first one on this. Was Andre Yoshevus is a heptathlete, super athlete, track guy at Princeton, but also a really good receiver. 6'3", 205-pound kid from Hawaii. And when I started looking into him, I was like, man, I actually know the receivers coach there really well. And it was just coincidence, because there's a guy, Brian Fillon, who used to be at Villanova. And he was like, a great resource to find out really in depth on these. And a lot of position coaches, usually, not always, but usually if you're a freaks list guy, it means you probably are a great worker in the weight room and in the off season. And those position coaches, I think, want to talk to you about them. Most times I would say 85% of the time, it's a player that the programs really want to champion. Now, there are some that just freak athlete. And it was like, I've had a couple where they were that guy, and you'd ask somebody and they would back you off them. And I'll respect that usually, mostly.
So you mentioned that there are some programs that aren't responsive. And I'm not going to make you name names here, but I feel like Georgia has to be one of them, because last year, Devontae Wyatt was the only guy who made the list for you, when Trayvon Walker, Jordan Davis, both put up all-time combines. Quay Walker, Lewis Seen blew up the combine as well. What do you think the impetus is for those schools to not be responsive to you? Is it they don't want to gas their guys up, or is it just they don't want to deal with the media as a whole?
I don't know. I honestly don't know the answer to that. I'm not gonna say that you're right. I'm certainly not gonna say that you're wrong. But I don't. The one thing that happens a little bit is I will ask about a guy, and this isn't a Georgia thing. This could be other schools. Mm-hmm. And I will ask about a player that you heard, or there's been some buzz, or they had legit track numbers out of high school. And especially if it's a place where I know the strength coach or know the staff, and they'll be like, they may give me somebody else. And for all sorts of reasons, maybe that kid just isn't, hasn't translated quite the same way 3-4 years later as he's added weight. Mm-hmm. Maybe they don't think he works that hard. Maybe they do not want him putting out there like that. I mean, I can think of a dozen situations over the last few years of me expecting them to say somebody and they say somebody else. And that's okay. Like where you've asked specifically. Mm-hmm. On the other part of it, I don't know, why the reluctance necessarily. It's not like some of the guys you mentioned, use Georgia as an example. Absolutely. Jordan Davis, tore up the combine. And we knew he was a really good player. I don't know if they just didn't want to pump the expectations, because I know this, when I do stuff leading into the draft, there's a bunch of schools or a bunch of, people who don't want the expectations sky high of, a kid, as a defensive end, he's going to vertical jump 42 inches. Then he only vertical jumps 38. Mm-hmm. That's still a great number, but it's like, did he disappoint? So I don't know what necessarily, and again, some of these schools are super tight-lipped about anything, so it's hard for me to speak on. It's really two schools right now. That's about it.
Yeah. I mean, we interview coaches all the time for the podcast, and like, you'll get guys ask about certain players, who are easily their top players, and they just won't, they refuse to acknowledge that they're even good. They're like, oh, he's talented, but he's got a lot of work to do, like those sort of things. So I feel like that's probably just old school coach speak. I'm gonna bring up though a couple guys from this list that I think are underrated based off of the numbers you put them. And I just want to hear your thoughts on them. First one is, I think, the darling of this list. Houston D-line / fullback Derek Parrish comes in at 49th, but he has a 21-inch neck. And to me, the most impressive number on this entire list, he ate 110 ounces of meat in one sitting. How do you only check in at 49 for you?
So when I heard this, by the way, so obviously the old West Virginia staff, or some of those guys, Ryan Dorchester, who's Dana Holgerson's right-hand man, was a manager and then a recruiting guy at West Virginia. Knows Owen Schmidt, knows the Pat McAfee, era well. And when he was telling me about him, I'm like, man, this sounds a lot like Owen 2.0. Now Owen did some other freaky stuff, but in terms of just something you'd see out of a movie, the 110 pounds of, of beef in one sitting. So immediately when I saw that, I texted Andy Staples, who I work with, who's definitely a high volume eater in his day. Now, Andy has since lost a bunch of weight, but I've been with Andy where, I've been with him in the Brazilian steakhouses, and not only was he a big eater, he was like the guy who looked like he dumped his plate over, wiped it clean. I was like, we were just having a conversation. Why did you, how did you eat so much so fast? And he was like, yeah, that's an insane amount of food for somebody to just chow down in one sitting. I mean, he could have been in the top 15. It's just like, the numbers are great. There's probably like 6 guys in there where I was like, they were anywhere from like 30 to 65, and they probably could have been in the top 15.
Yeah. So I've done actually a 4-pound burger before, and I couldn't actually finish the bun. I did the burger. So I had 4 pounds of meat, which that is 6 pounds of meat, 110 ounces. So that's a different level. And that is just, I could not fathom. I felt the worst I've ever felt in my life after doing the 4-pound burger. So that is something else for Derek Parrish. The other one, I'm going to give some love to Cincinnati here, being in Cincinnati. Tyler Scott, wide receiver here, 4'2", 940, 40-inch vertical, 11-foot broad jump. If he actually tests like that pre-draft, Marquise Goodwin is the only other wide receiver in NFL history for the database that we have to match all those numbers. How do you check in at only 54th for you on this list?
It's funny because he has a teammate whose numbers are almost identical, except he has the 40-inch vertical. The other guy, I think, was like 3 inches shorter on the vertical, but all the other numbers, GPS numbers, everything were the same. I mean, it's the kind of thing where I think if he was Marvin Harrison dimensions, Marvin Harrison Jr. dimensions, as opposed to that, I think he would have been a lot higher. I got 4 Cincinnati guys. There were 3 that ended up making the list. And, look, a lot of credit to Luke Fickell, a lot of credit to his strength guy, Brady Collins, because I've had a lot of Cincinnati guys in the last 3 or 4 years. And if you even look, even Desmond Ridder, I think when he went to the combine, he ran really well. I don't think people thought he was going to run slow, but I think a lot of these guys, Alec Pierce I feel like he was a multiple time freaks list guy.
Yeah.
They have really developed a bunch of explosive athletes. And I think, again, this guy certainly is deserving to be, if he matches those numbers. And again, like I said, what Collins has done there with Luke Fickell, those guys now have a pretty solid track record of developing and backing it up. You saw it, especially on, like I said, Alec Pierce was this being there, special all around athlete, volleyball player, played some linebacker. I'm not surprised if he's going to have a really good NFL career for a long time.
All right. Last question about the freaks list. Then we'll get into a little college football talk. Who would be your pick for the biggest breakout player from this list?
Oh man, that's tough. Can I think about this for 20 seconds?
I'll give you mine. I'll give you mine real quick, and you think about yours. I'm going to go Justin Flo, the Oregon linebacker. Obviously, he's played one game in 2 years, former 5-star. I'm not really going on a limb calling like the number one linebacker recruit a breakout player, but that would be my pick for anyone. He came at 76.
Yeah, if he can stay healthy, right? One game, he hurt it. They played Fresno. He was like the national defensive player of the week that week, and then was gone. I'm tempted to say, because there's a few guys on here, like Kalijah Cansey from Pitt is super underrated. I mean, he's a first team all league guy, but I feel like sometimes the people lose Pitt a little bit. I don't know, if I had to look at somebody, let me think for a second more. I'm kind of going through this because there's a bunch of guys who are kind of under the radar a little bit, but I don't know if I would say they're breakout guys. Let me say Riley Mills from Notre Dame.
Oh, you're after my heart there. Love it.
Yeah, he's like, when I got all the numbers, I got a bunch of Notre Dame guys I was kind of deciding between. I was like, man, this is a really big, explosive athlete. He's almost 300 pounds, 6'5". I think that, he's going up against really good, especially now too. They have, I would argue, one of the two best O-line coaches in the country. So now that's what he's going against every day in practice. I think that's really good. I think he will be one of the biggest breakout players on this list.
I love it. Let's say we're going to talk a little college football. Let's stay at Notre Dame though. What are your expectations for Marcus Freeman? Obviously sky high. They have the top recruiting class in, modern Notre Dame history, number 1 or number 2, depending on where you look. Do you think they keep that together? And do you think he has, picks up where Brian Kelly basically left off with the program?
I think he can. I like the staff that he put together. And as I said, I think arguably one of the two best O-line coaches in the country, arguably the best running back coach in the country that they added. I think he's got experience on defense. The biggest thing where I think he has again, upside the draft term, but I can use it here, I think, is because he has is seen as so relatable to players and so connected. I think he has a chance to get in and win over kids that maybe didn't want to play for Brian Kelly or just didn't feel like as much of a connection to Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly is a terrific coach. He's won everywhere he's been. I don't want to take anything away from him. He did a remarkable job at Notre Dame for a long time. The one thing was he got a lot of really good players. He developed them. I think, can Marcus Freeman get just a few more difference makers that maybe the other, teams that are better than them playing with? I think he can. Now, what do they do year one? I mean, they already took a big injury over the weekend at a position that they're kind of thin at receiver. They've taken a blow in like late in the summer at running back where they had a freshman who was going to be a really good player. I think they're a legit like top 8 team. I don't know if, I think it may be a year or 2 or maybe 3 years before they are a national title contender, but he's got to grow into the position, which I think he will, but I think he surrounded himself with a really good staff.
All right. If it's not Ohio State or Alabama, who feel, AP polls came out, they're 1 and 2. They feel like a clear tier kind of above everyone else in terms of just all around talent. Who would you bet on to win the national championship this year besides those two? Say outside of those two.
Yeah, those would certainly be my two. I I look at, Georgia still, I mean, if Will Anderson's not the most dominant player in the country, he's in the middle of the defense at Georgia and Jalen Carter, and they have players all around there still. I guess if I had to pick a third team, I would probably say Georgia. Stetson Bennett has won a national title. They can, everybody can believe in him, and they have the most talented tight end room in the country, right? So you have a shorter quarterback who can make some plays, and now you got Brock Bowers, you got a 6'8", 275-pound guy, and then you got maybe the best athlete of the bunch in Eric Gilbert out there, as long as he's able to stay on the field. I mean, that gives – and Todd Monken's really good with receivers and what he can do with them. Now you're giving him three pieces. I mean, Oscar Delp, the other tight end, is really talented. So I could easily talk myself into Georgia. And it's not like crazy because, you've seen how many 5-stars they'd land on their defending champs, but that would probably be my third.
Yeah, if Stetson Bennett weren't their quarterback, I feel like I would get on board too. But my gosh, like that, Stetson was on his way to transferring 3/4 through that national championship game last year. So I think I would lean someone outside. I would go more like, USC, in my opinion. I think someone off the wall has a chance of doing like a Michigan-esque run this year.
Well, that's offensively, I could see it. Defensively, I think they have too much to overcome there. I like Alex Grinch. I just don't know if they have. I mean, they were so bad. My TV crew did their game against UCLA late last year, and they were so bad. I mean, that was the worst USC team, and I've lived out here for close to 20 years. That's the worst USC team I've seen physically. They were just completely dysfunctional. And I'm not saying Lincoln can't get them a lot better, but they have to get so, it's like, and I could see them being favored in pretty much every game they play. I just don't know if their margin for error when you're so average on defense personnel wise can do it. I thought you might have said like Baylor or somebody like that, or, like their quarterback is talented. He's kind of a little under the radar. He was a baseball player. He slings it around. They have a really good D line. We'll see, like they obviously lost some good players in the draft though. So I don't know. This is a fun time of year because I think you could have gone in like 8 different directions there of who the third team or the sleeper is.
So you're not going to go with Texas, who got voted number 1 by someone in the coaches poll. You're connected. Do you know who that was that voted them number 1?
I do not know. I can find out from Ralph Russo. I'm sure that, I imagine, somebody will know. So
that one, that always blows my mind that someone's going to go out on a limb like that, because you can't vote for yourself, right? In the coaches poll.
No. And it's different from the AP because it's like the AP, you can find out who did what. So on this one, I don't know, there's no Steve Spurriers out there who are like kind of laking in the weeds to kind of tweak people with what they do with their vote. So I don't know who would be most likely to throw that one in. I don't know if Brent Venables votes or if, one of the Big 12 coaches wants to put more pressure on Sark going in.
Love that.
Maybe it's one of the Big 12 coaches.
So let's talk a little NIL. We touched on this last time we talked to you before last season, but it's only sort of gained steam. The ball's only been rolling downhill and picking up speed here. And you're starting to get basically base salaries at a lot of different programs. USC has a group of boosters. I think it's Student Body Right, forming this, 501c charity or nonprofit that is just paying these guys salaries for appearances. SMU has done the same thing, $36,000 a year. Is every school going to have this within, 2 or 3 years by now?
So probably some version of it. I think the tricky part is, like you said a minute ago, the word boosters. I think the idea of boosters being involved with players who have not signed somewhere, so it's recruits and it's pay for play or it's transfers. That's the part that I don't think the NCAA knows how to deal with. I had a conversation with George Kliavkov, the Pac-12 commissioner, a couple of weeks back, and he said they wanted to get behind legislation where you can't do anything until a player commits. And then I kind of pressed him on it. I think he meant, I was like, look, kids commit all the time. And then I was like, do you mean like when they actually sign? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, well, there is a difference there. But to me, that's the part that I think is so unwieldy for them, because it feels like almost everybody could be defined as a booster who's involved in these things now.
Yeah. What do you think is ultimately going to happen then with the NCAA and basically the pay for play? Is the NCAA just going to go defunct and have no more governing power?
Yeah, I feel like it's headed in that direction. It's just, does football break away? Because for the longest time, people, most people who are around college football know that the NCAA doesn't put on, it's not like the NCAA basketball tournament, but still there's involvement. Some of the legislation that gets passed, I think people scratch their heads at it. How does it work? The governance piece, like all those things. I think now the money has gotten so big and the NCAA seems to be so toothless. I think it probably will get to that point where it splits apart, just because I feel for the football side, to some degree, the NCAA is outliving its usefulness, or I don't know if that's the expression I want quite there, but it's like it can't deliver. And I think once people in the sport know that the NCAA is not set up to really do anything about the issues that they have, then I think they're like, well, what are we doing here? What do we need them for?
Is it going to be ultimately like conference governance? Is it going to turn into Big Ten versus SEC, two main conferences, and they basically run the show?
Yeah, I mean, that's the way it seems to really be headed. That's where all the money, or most of the money, is. And I think what they got to be careful of is you don't want to hamstring your own leagues for competitive reasons against the other one, because then all of a sudden it'll just like, hey, if our coaches, like the Pac-12 coaches, back in May, were very adamant that they were going to try to rein things in. Well, if they're already at a competitive disadvantage now in terms of for the variety of reasons, some of them self-inflicted. But if you already kind of button things up, then all of a sudden your disadvantage is going to only grow.
All right, last question here, Bruce, and then we'll let you go. I know you're college football. I was a reporter. Do you ever get a chance to, though, get out and tailgate a game and enjoy a game? And if you did, what would be your drink of choice?
It has been a while since for a football game, especially like as being somebody involved with the pregame. I associate, for me, tailgating would be to at least have a beer or a few.
Yeah.
And that's real. I can't really go that way before a game, because if one becomes two, and then all of a sudden, you don't want to be in front, have a microphone in your hand at that point. But we get, getting to do a lot of Big Ten games, especially the last couple of years. You walk through the tailgates and it just smells amazing, and you just see it. There's certain places that just feel like football, right? And when I was working on my recruiting book meat market, I was down in Oxford, Mississippi, and that's great tailgating. It's just a cool scene. And so all those places, jump out at me. I mean, this is kind of a random one, but like, I think because of where our TV trucks are for Iowa games, it just feels like college football there. It's an interesting little college town, and they love their team, and the fans do a really good job tailgating. I just think it's one of those where it's the one that comes to mind at first, because of my experience in the last few years of going to games and walking through the tailgates and just kind of seeing it, and it just feels very much like a slice of Americana.
I hand up. I've actually never been to an Iowa game, so I will have to make.
You're not that far away. You should drive over.
I know. I will have to make that trip. Thank you so much, Bruce, for the time. Really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. It was great talking with you.
Awesome stuff there from Bruce, as always. I loved his story about tweeting out the wrong year on the Freaks List link. That's just, I know that feeling of tweeting out something dumb, being like, I'm just going to have to eat it, and living to see another day. Bruce, always great to have him on. Let's, though, talk about the rookie stock report here. We're going to be doing probably this as a weekly segment throughout the season. Who's going up, who's trending down, and obviously after 3 weeks of the preseason, we got a lot of guys to talk about here. So we'll go position by position. Who caught my eye? Who in a good and bad way? So we'll start at the quarterback position, where like a lot of people were getting gassed up. Probably the only, drafted guy that at no point got gassed up was Matt Corral, who obviously makes my stock down list here. The dude had a 46.5 passing grade on 33 dropbacks, and then had a serious list Frank injury is out for the season. That was about as bad a start as you can get. Did not look comfortable, did not look ready to play whatsoever. was the worry. Like that was the worry coming from the offense he played at Ole Miss. He was point and shoot. He was a loaded bow and arrow with the way he had to play quarterback at Ole Miss. It was RPOs till the cows come home, and it was play action passes more than any other quarterback in the country. It was just not a NFL translatable skill set to develop. So when he had to do NFL sort of things, it looked panicky early on. And so sadly, you're not going to get that year of kind of, soaking everything in and kind of just being around it with that injury. But he was never challenging Baker Mayfield. He was never challenging Sam Darnold. Just wasn't going to happen. Now, the rest of the quarterback class, there was really only one guy I thought stood out to me as looking different from pre-draft eval. That was Kenny Pickett. I thought of all the guys, he looked just like a better version of what I thought he was going to look like out the gate. Sam Howell had some nice things this past week, had a really good game and an extended look. As a runner, I mean, he was breaking tackles left and right. He broke the most tackles of any quarterback this preseason, I believe. And looks like he could be a legitimate scrambling threat. Now, still a little up and down, still some ugly decisions on tape. I don't think he's challenging Carson Wentz anytime soon. But if Carson Wentz is about to hit his, snap threshold and the Commanders are out of it already, we could see Sam Howell sneak into some playing time towards the end of the season. I think he definitely deserves that at the very least to get that QB2 job there over to Heineke. Malik Willis, I mean, the highlights of Malik Willis were sick, just like they were at Liberty. But was Malik Willis ready to step on an NFL field week one? I don't think so. I'm like, I'd be excited if I were a Titans fan, but I don't think it was anything different than what we saw at Liberty in terms of changing your evaluation. Obviously, those guys were, Howell and Willis were 1 and 2 on my draft board. So like in terms of the quarterback position. So I should, be rooting for them theoretically, but I just think they were kind of what I expected out the gate. Didn't do anything or show anything more than I really anticipated. They were just going to be raw guys. But Kenny Pickett, on the other hand, he looked, of all the rookie quarterbacks, ready to play. Now, is he getting ready to play like high-end football? That was always the question, and we still don't know because 6.9 average depth of target. Some of that's Matt Canada's offense. Some of that's you're playing against third stringers who are playing off coverage for the vast majority of snaps this preseason. And you can take a hitch route at will if you want. And he was. But once you get to, next Sunday, that's not going to be the case. You're going to have to play a little different brand of football. So impressed that he was taking what was there, that he was getting the ball out quickly. And there were some high-end throws on his tape. His touchdown in week 2, the post route was masterclass. Threw it before the break because pressure was bearing down on him. If you had to hold it a split second longer, it would not have gotten that ball off cleanly. And those were things that I think that process speed, the anticipation speed were things that I maybe had a little questions about on his tape at Pittsburgh that, again, tiny sample size, 44 dropbacks. That's one game's worth of snaps over the course of 3 weeks of the preseason. And again, it is preseason. Daniel Jones looked great as a rookie. Just important to remember. But I'm impressed. And they'll probably start Mitch Trubisky because he also looked solid this preseason. But if it's week 6 and things aren't working with Trubisky, week 4, things aren't working with Trubisky, I think they're going to be more than willing to have a quick trigger with how Kenny Pickett looked this preseason. All right, let's get to the running back position, where 2 guys really caught my eye in a positive way, one in a not so positive way. Dameon Pierce, the talk of every fantasy analyst over the past 2 weeks.
He's the best fantasy football player of all time.
He's RB1 at the moment.
Depending on if you just log on Twitter right now and you look up like Dameon Pierce fantasy, he's the best fantasy football player that's ever put on cleats.
Yeah. And it's like, it was 11 attempts. He had 86 yards and 11 attempts this preseason with 4 broken tackles. They were sick. They were a sick 11 attempts. Don't get me wrong. But he's probably still running behind the Texans O-line, which at best is a league average O-line. He'll be fine. He will be their starter. He is very good. He was RB3 on the PFF draft board. I'm obviously high on him, but I think it's temper the expectations just a touch. The other guy that caught my eye, though, Jordan Mason for the San Francisco 49ers. I believe he was a UDFA out of Georgia Tech. Now, I'm a little upset that I wasn't higher on Jordan Mason because back in 2019 against Miami, he actually set the PFF single game record for broken tackles. He had 19 broken tackles in that game. He is elusive, always was elusive as hell at Georgia Tech. Obviously lost his kind of lead dog status after that 2019 year to Jahmyr Gibbs, who now transferred to Alabama. And they split time a bunch the past 2 years. So that didn't help his draft stock. But it's preseason. He was running with power. He was breaking tackles. Once again, on, let's see here, on 19 carries, he broke 5 tackles, averaged 3.6 yards after contact per attempt. The only thing is you're dealing with a limited athlete, which is probably why a lot of people weren't high on him, which is why he ended up as UDFA. 4.58 40, 33-inch vertical, 9.11 broad jump. Like, what's your upshot at that point is probably what a lot of people would push back on. But I'm a fan of what I saw. I think he's making that roster, and it's already impressed a little bit more than we've ever seen from Trey Sermon over his time there. So the one guy I'm a little wary of, stock down at running back. And again, this is stock down, but only because the stock was high to begin with. This is not stock is worthless. This is just stock down. It's Breece Hall from the New York Jets. Not the best preseason. And the thing, 14 carries to 29 yards. He didn't have a lot of holes. There wasn't a lot of yards to be gained there. Adrian Peterson's prime isn't going for like 60 yards behind what the run blocking he was given. Just say that. It was average yards before contact was behind the line of scrimmage. But he brought some of that on himself, I will say. He was indecisive in a number of runs where in that scheme, the outside zone, which was a lot of the concepts that he was given, you got to make one cut and live with it. You got to make your decision and then live with the results of it. And I think too often he got a little wary of, took one step this way, starts patterning the feet in the backfield. It's fixable. Those things are not death knells by any means. His career's not over. But if you're talking about week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, are we going to see that fixed already? Is he going to be super productive? I just think it might be a little slower learning curve than everyone wants to give to a guy who just turned 21 in May. I mean, willing to give him time here, but that was not the best preseason if you're really trying to, live up to the hype he was getting pre-draft. All right, on to the receiver position where we got a number of dudes. George Pickens, obviously on this list. I honestly think George Pickens' hype's gone a little too high. I think he's still clearly wide receiver 3 in that Steelers offense and wasn't like separating at a high level on tape, despite, that's never been him really. His game's been catch point. His game's been physicality. That's translating. And that's the good thing. That's why you think like long-term willing to think that he's going to outplay his draft stock. But I would just push back a touch on, maybe year 1 going for 1,000 yards, something like that. The guy who I wouldn't push back on the hype right now is Isaiah Likely, because like I said it when he was drafted, that was the perfect spot for him to go, because the Ravens don't really use that second tight end. It's like inline blockers. They're all like move blockers, and they get him going across the formation.
So you're not even going to call him a tight end. You just threw him in the receivers here.
He's the move tight end.
Receiver.
He's the move tight end. Oh, these are guys who catch the football, receivers. So they're wrapping up tight ends in this as well. But caught all 12 targets, 144 yards, touchdown, 7 broken tackles, 4 of 4 in contested situations this preseason. And the thing I love is that the Ravens just let him play at 235. He got up to his pro day to like 245. Obviously could not sustain that weight. Tested out very poorly at that size, but he's at 235. He can block on the move still. And now he can be dynamic in space. And he really did look still like a guy that you don't want to try to tackle one-on-one in the open field. So very much on the team of Isaiah Likely as tight end 2 in that offense could produce as like a tight end 1 in other offenses would, just because of how that offense is schemed. A couple of the guys here that I thought definitely are real players, can make a real role year one that I wasn't necessarily sure when they got drafted. Romeo Dobbs, excuse me. He went by Dobbs all draft season, but then said, yeah, it's actually Dobbs. I just never really corrected anyone. So Romeo Dobbs. Now, the hands drops are a little bit of an issue. Aaron Rodgers was lamenting that. He did have 3 drops this preseason, but you can't fake what he was doing as a receiver. He was stacking corners on the outside, NFL corners. Ambry Thomas, who was starting, I think, for the 49ers last year in the playoff game that the Packers did lose, he was getting behind them and over the top of them. And you can't fake that at 6'2", 202. I think he will have a role in this Packers offense. Now, is he going to usurp Sammy Watkins, Allen Lazard? Probably not, but he'll see the football field and he'll see some targets. The last guy, Khalil Shakir, interested to see if he breaks into over Isaiah McKenzie at the slot there, because caught all 8 targets preseason for 151 yards. I think he's just that reliable slot option that, Isaiah McKenzie's really never been. So, and the Buffalo Bills, that offense, have a very good, or very defined slot role that not a lot of schemes, or not every scheme has a guy that they're putting in the slot every single time, and that's running kind of the quote unquote slot route tree. Bills do. So we'll be interested to see Shakir, who that's like his bread and butter, how he fares in that. Stock down at the receiver position, though. This one, it's got a lot of stock downs. Not a lot of people are high on him, not even the Tennessee Titans. And it's Treylon Burks. 4 of 7 targets for 37 yards all preseason. 1 touchdown, which was a pretty much uncontested touchdown. And that's on 48 receiving snaps, so less than 1 yard per route run. Kyle Phillips is now starting over him in the slot. And before you're like, Treylon Burks, he's 6'2", 225. Of course he's not going to be starting in the slot. That's not like a slot receiver. Kyle Phillips is, 185, 6 foot, or 5'11". That's a slot receiver. Burks played slot in college. So if he can't start in the slot, the position he played in college, over a guy drafted a few rounds later than him, 4 rounds later than him, that's a little worrisome. So yeah, stock down a touch on Treylon Burks, but it was always going to be a project. I mean, when you don't run a full route tree, it's not going to look good when you just try to do it against NFL athletes. So still, jury's still out, but that obviously, if you're looking for him to produce year one, I don't see the A.J. Brown trajectory. I just don't. I've said that all along. Jalen Tolbert, the other one who I was high on. I thought he could even be NFL ready and come in and get the wide receiver 2 job with Michael Gallup out in Dallas. But Jalen Tolbert, man, he's really struggling with the physicality of the NFL already. And that's a touch worrisome. 6 of 15 targets this preseason for 44 yards and only 1 of 3 at the catch point, didn't break a single tackle. Like, he let guys get their hands on him and then couldn't get him off. So a little worrisome. Obviously, level of competition jump from South Alabama to the NFL can make a part of that. But yeah, Jalen Tolbert had a bit of a rough go here. Probably not going to be your wide receiver 2 in Dallas. All right, let's get to the offensive line, where 2 guys really caught my eye. 2 guys who were high-end athletes testing coming out that you thought, had concerns about at their size. Can they translate? One, Cam Jurgens, the Nebraska center, turned now Eagle center. He was flying around the football field. I mean, you squint, that was Jason Kelce. Early career Jason Kelce, because I think he's even a little bit more explosive than Kelce is now. Yeah, Cam Jurgens, he had a block on Jermaine Johnson, the screen game. That was just, he caught Jermaine Johnson's your left defensive end, Cam Jurgens at center, and it's a screen to Johnson's side. Jurgens beats him all the way out to the flat and then pancakes him right on his back. It was the way he moves, and obviously being able to learn from Jason Kelce like that, it's only a matter of time. He's going to be a dude. Probably not going to play this year unless barring injury. But yeah, Cam Jurgens had an impressive preseason. The other one, Zach Tom, Packers offensive tackle. didn't allow a pressure. Dude did not allow a single pressure all preseason, and they even threw him at guard as well. And I don't think he's a guard long term, but I even consider him at guard over someone like Royce Newman because he's been that good in pass pro. 75 pass blocking snaps, not a single pressure allowed this preseason. Should not be too surprising at the highest pass blocking grade in the country last year, but yeah, a guy who was super high and coming out, falls to the 4th round. I don't know how, but I think he's starting. He's one of the 5 best for Green Bay. I don't know if he starts, but he's one of their 5 best offensive linemen right now. Stock down at the position. Trevor Penning, not too surprising here, but he was not ready in pass pro. We said it coming out. He is one hell of an athlete, one hell of a specimen. Pass pro technique is an issue, and it's the thing that doesn't just take overnight to fix. So I don't think he's your starting left tackle. Now, is he still a man amongst boys even at the NFL level? Yeah, he was doing some things, some defensive ends that would be illegal on the street. But 6 pressures on 54 pass blocking snaps. His trader, Duke Manyweather, said he's struggling. He's not comfortable with vertical sets yet. That was kind of Andrew Thomas's knock coming out. Or not knock. That was like his rookie year. Why it was so bad is when you don't vertical set in college and you're asked to vertical set in the NFL, do something completely new, it's not going to look good. And it didn't. But that wasn't like the only thing kind of hampering Penning this preseason. The other one that hasn't really gotten talked about much, obviously Penning's going to draw headlines. He's a first rounder. But Logan Bruss, the guard for the Rams, he did not look ready to start either. The scary thing is like he has to start, or like they drafted him at the back end of the 3rd with the expressed intent, I believe, of making him a starter at guard because they were thin. After Andrew Whitworth's retirement, they were like guard or bust, which is why he was ultimately, their first pick all the way at the back end of the 3rd. But Bobby Evans, Coleman Shelton, Tremaine Ankrum, like they don't have a lot of options if it's not going to be Logan Bruss. 5 pressures, 3 other losses in pass protection on 35 pass blocking snaps. A rough 10.4 pass blocking grade this preseason. It didn't look good, man. There has to be better options there, but I don't know if there are, is the scary part. So this Rams offensive line may not be the Rams offensive line we saw a season ago. All right, let's go to the defense side of the ball. Defensive line, Travis Jones looked comfortable with the sort of physicality of the NFL. Rare to see from a defensive tackle. Only 72.1 overall grade, but I think a guy who you could just plug and play. Now, is he going to be electric out the gate? No, but he looked ready to hold up to the rigors, which, again, DT is a very difficult position to translate. The power difference between centers and guards in college versus grown men centers and guards is huge. And so the stuff that worked in college doesn't often work in the NFL, which we'll see here in a second with Devontae Wyatt when we talk about him. So Travis Jones, though, looked ready for that. And the other one, Nick Bonito, 87.6 pass rushing grade. I thought played through contact really well. Something he didn't really even want to do at Oklahoma as a pass rusher because he could just run around guys because he's that kind of athlete. But the Denver Broncos, they look like they got a couple guys now. A couple of sub-package rushers with some juice, Baron Browning and him, that, man, that's 2 guys in the 4.5s to go along with Bradley Chubb, who you're probably kick inside on 3rd downs, and Randy Gregory. This Broncos defense may not take a step back. I've been saying they could take a step back after losing Vic Fangio. They may not. So impressed with those 2. Stock down, though, in the D-line. Devontae Wyatt, man, was not ready for double teams. And again, you're not playing against ones here, or a lot of ones for too often in the preseason, which is concerning. 50.2 overall grade. Now, still got some motor as a pass rusher. I think you could still do some things in that regard as a rookie, but I can see why he's not running with the ones right now in Green Bay, because you're not putting him on the field on rundowns from what I saw this preseason. He's going to get killed out there unless things change. And again, for a 24-year-old coming out, it's not the way you want a guy to be trending, and why I've stocked down a little bit on Jermaine Johnson too. 60.1 pass overall grade, this preseason. Had really only one high-end rep as a pass rusher that I saw. And again, it comes back down to pre-draft eval. If this was, Trayvon Walker coming out, where the pre-draft eval was project, worrisome. Jermaine Johnson, the pre-draft eval was he's 23 years old, ready to play in the NFL. And really only one nice rep as a pass rusher came against the Giants, and then he ended up whiffing on Tyrod. I think it was the play Tyrod got hurt. And he was the one I mentioned earlier, got pancaked by Cam Jordan. So a little bit of a shaky start for him out the gate. Not writing him off, but that was not kind of what people were hyping him up as after his Senior Bowl performance. Let's get the linebacker position where Nakobe Dean was Nakobe Dean. I don't know if it's stock up, but same guy we saw at Georgia, 87.5 grade versus the run. Same guy, just like a heady player, just very intelligent, plays the game of football at a high level. So Nakobe Dean's he'll be making an impact when he's healthy and on the football field. Size, it didn't really show up. It hasn't shown up. Just hadn't yet. And the other guy I'll mention, and this one's kind of off the wall, Sterling Weatherford, Indianapolis Colts UDFA, was a safety at Miami of Ohio last year. But he's 6'4", 224. I was just like, he actually ended up having the second most stops of any rookie or of any player in this preseason, 10 stops. I was like impressed with his read and react between the tackles for a guy who never played there. And it's something that we always say with these Isaiah Simmonses and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoahs. It's like you really don't know what you're going to get transitioning them to the reads they're going to have to make. But Chris Ballard, that dude he can evaluate linebackers. Great track record at that position. Would not surprise me if Sterling Weatherford. Not that he's going to make an impact this year. They already have a stable there. But at some point, turns into a guy that's seeing and starting on a football field. All right, stock down at linebacker. Brian Asamoah is probably the only one of the bunch that I was really like, I'd feel uncomfortable putting him out in the field right now. I just wasn't seeing it. The speed, the processing speed is not there. Finished 46.6 overall grade this preseason. And when you trend towards the smaller side of the position, where you're 226, and where you are, Kobe Dean or Brian Asamoah like this, you have to play faster. You have to play more downhill than a guy who's 6'4", 250, than Quay Walkers of the world or the Micah Parsons of the world, because you can't take on blocks from a standstill. If a offensive lineman or a fullback or a tight end catches you at a standstill at the second level, you're going for a ride. Whereas the bigger linebackers of the world, that's not the case. You can get a little more power up to speed and not get rocked back taking on offensive linemen. But Asamoah, far too often on his tape, especially this past week against Denver, that was not the case. So him a little bit behind the curve, stock down on Brian Asamoah. Let's get to the defensive backs, where this looks like the quarterback class looks good, man. Stingley on 40 snaps, Sauce on 34 snaps, Kyer Elam, Trent McDuffie, all those first rounders looked the part right away. And now you're not facing, Devontae Adams of the world, DeAndre Hopkins of the world. You're not facing those guys in the preseason. But you can only go head to head with the guys across from you, and they held their own. All those guys this preseason. So I think all of those guys are your starters. All those guys could make an impact year one. Very impressed with what I saw from all of them. And then after that, there were a number of guys that I was also impressed with, later round dudes, whether it was Deron Bland, the cornerback for the Dallas Cowboys, 7 of 18 targets for 62 yards. Probably my biggest regret once the draft board came out, final draft board from last year, that I wasn't higher on. He was in the 150s, and I was just like, I like his tape a lot more than that after the fact. Ends up going around that range in the actual draft. I believe this is the 5th round to the Dallas Cowboys. But he's just, for a guy at his size, over 6'2", over 200 pounds, to have the hips that he does, it's a good combination, even if he's not like an elite athlete. Big fan of what I saw from him this preseason. And then another guy in a kind of similar mold, Christian Benford, the Buffalo Bills cornerback, who was another smaller school guy. He came out of Villanova, didn't have a ton of tape on him, but he's 6'1", 208, and they had him sitting up at the line of scrimmage all preseason, 39 press snaps, 1 to 2 targets for 9 yards all preseason. Christian Benford. Bills, they know what to look for at corners. They've had a great track record of the guys they do draft at that position. Look like they may have 2 more guys in Christian Benford and Kyer Elam. A couple other guys worth shouting out. Tariq Woolen, Did not expect him to look this good this early. 3 of 9 targets, 38 yards. I obviously went to a great fit there in Seattle with what they do. I think he is your starter out the gate. Obviously not a lot of competition for that, but excited to see what he does, because the biggest thing that I kept like seeing around his tape that I was like, damn, like is his ability to stop. It's not just that he can get up to speed fast, but he throttled down on some hitches and came back to balls that I was like, I don't know if I saw that on tape, that well at UTSA. So very impressed with what he put there. And then a couple safeties. Nick Cross, Colt safety. Man, his explosiveness is out of this world. The former Maryland safety made a number of plays on the ball this preseason. 6 foot, 212, still only 20 years old. Had a pass breakup, a couple other forced incompletions, 1 of 4 targets for 6 yards, 89.9 overall grade. That guy's going to be a player. Very, very impressive preseason from him. And then Jalen Petrie already in the run game. I mean, he's probably one of the 10 best safeties in the NFL versus the run. Had 7 tackles on 19 run plays. I tweeted out a clip of it. Go check it out. It is as impressive as it was at Baylor. Jalen Petrie, TBD on how he fares the coverage aspect, but he is going to be a value add in the run game. Really the only, and like I said, a lot of the early drafted corners, early drafted safeties, I think were holding their own. The only one who was a little wary about that I'm going stock down here is JT Woods, the safety for the LA Chargers. And it's just because he still just can't tackle. His tackling form is so rough. I mean, it's just, you got to get this guy as far away from the line of scrimmage as possible. 4 tackles he missed this preseason, 13 attempts. Missed over 20% of his tackles in his career at Baylor. Dude can fly, can make plays in the football. But as like your third safety now in Los Angeles, you're only coming in to be the middle of the field guy. If that, I worry about him as a tackler. All right, we're going to do other breakout performers next week. Rookie contract guys who impressed, guys who I thought took a leap in some way, shape, or form. We'll do that next Monday. We're going to be talking about college football preview on Thursday, but we're going to get to the mailbag now. My favorite part of the show, always. Few questions this week, some notes about the mailbag going forward. Again, send them in to me on Sundays. Please, when you do ask a mailbag question, start it with the word mailbag in all caps if you could. That way I can organize the DMs on the Talkin' Ball Twitter account a little bit better and sift through these a little bit easier, because we get a lot of randos too. And the other thing is, I am going to not be reading every single one. You're going to have to come with it to make the show. Going to have to get some good quality content, some good questions. If you just want to know about, say, Florida's running back and how he fares as a prospect, I might just answer to you straight in that DM. I may not
subscribe to PFF
or get it.
You'll know everything, and download the app too. And I'll tell you everything you need to know.
There you go.
Also, should we bring back voicemails?
I think we are going to. I want to bring them back though for like actual takes. Like I want people to have an opinion on something that they think is worthwhile that no one else is talking about, instead of questions. Because the questions are easier in like a written format. I think we're just wasting people's time. But like, come with a take, a well thought out take, and we could maybe run that on Thursdays. The speak pipes.
Let's do it.
I think we'll start doing that. So if Quinn put the link in the description. If you have a take on a prospect, on a team, on something that you think no one's talking about, someone needs to bring this up, send it in a speak pipe. If they're good enough, we'll make the show. I will grade your takes. I'll give it a PFF grade. We'll call it grade the take. On Thursdays, we will do that for you guys. So again, link in the description, speak pipe. Go ahead and do that. All right, let's get to the mailbag. First mailbag question comes from Nick Hogan via text message. He said, where would Will Anderson, the Alabama defensive end, rank in the NFL among edge defenders right now? Which I love these questions, by the way. This is my favorite hypotheticals because we can never prove this. No one has any like real earthly idea. And like rookies project into the NFL, and everyone's different. So he could step on an NFL field tomorrow and not be able to do shit, but then 6 months from now, maybe he'd be sick. Maybe he'd be a top 10 guy. It's just every learning curve is different. So I'm going to go through and say, I think there's 10 for sure's that I would say are definitely 100% going to take over Will Anderson right now. They are Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, Nick Bosa, Joey Bosa, Max Crosby, Von Miller, Khalil Mack, Chandler Jones, DeMarcus Ware, Rashawn Gary. Those are 10 guys I would for sure take over. Then I have 10 more here that I put that I'm like, they're good enough that I don't think I'd want to risk it with kind of the learning curve of Will Anderson of will he, won't he be good out the gate? How long it's going to take? Because he doesn't have hell of an athlete, unbelievable play strength at his size. He's not like a technician just yet. He's not that caliber that still matters at the NFL. It is still like how a lot of the best, like the vast majority of the best pass rushers still have to be technicians. So it's a little worrisome. So these are the 10 that I'd say is a debate. Trey Hendrickson, Robert Quinn, Randy Gregory, Shaq Barrett, Marcus Davenport, J.J. Watt, Brian Burns, Darius Smith, Daniel Hunter, Carl Lawson. Those are, I'd put in all like, that's a debate. And then you have some Asian guys like Brandon Graham, Cameron Jordan, where it's like, would you rather go there where they may be falling off a cliff production-wise, or would you rather go for the youth and the athlete that Will Anderson is? That's TBD. And then you have like some other young guys who are ascending who it's like, oh, they could be even better. Like a Montez Sweat, like a Chase Young, like an Aiden Hutchinson. So I'd probably put him somewhere in the low 20s just to be safe. But if you wanted to put him higher, I don't think I'd push back too much. Like as a prospect, he's up there. He's going to be up there with the best of the best that we've seen in the PFF era. All right, next question here comes from Brandon Reiblich on Twitter. Said, I have a scenario for you. It's the 2020 college football season. Aiden Hutchinson doesn't get hurt against Indiana, plays all the games in that season, and has the same dominance that he had in 2021 in this hypothetical 2020 season. In addition, he also tested the same numbers in the pre-draft events. Where does Aiden Hutchinson get taken in the 2021 NFL draft? And then he adds, my take, his ceiling draft position would have been 16 to the Cardinals, and average range would have been 23 to the Vikings or Jets if they don't trade up for Elijah Vera Tucker. Man, that one, I just disagree. I think the
steep drop from 2 to 16.
Yeah, that's like, I think that's selling him way short. And the other thing being like, he would have been considered a better prospect should he have done that a year earlier. He wouldn't have had an injury, kind of red flag on his profile. He would have been 20 years old when he was drafted. He would have had a lot more positives in those factors that teams still do take into account. I think at the very worst, Minnesota would not have traded out of 14 and taken him there. At probably, I could have seen him go as high as 4 to Atlanta, just because that's a position that goes higher in your normal NFL draft. Like, people feel safer about defensive ends than tight ends as top 5 picks more often than not. And yeah, Pitt's a unicorn, but could have seen him go to Atlanta. I think at the very, I think also at the very worst, Philly doesn't take Devontae Smith over him. I think Philly would have taken Aiden Hutchinson just with where they prioritize in the draft usually at number 10 or I guess it would have been 12 if they didn't make that trade with Dallas. So yeah, I think it's 4, 10, 14 would have been your spots. Or even Dave Gettleman wouldn't have traded out 11 and taken him there. So I don't think he would have gotten past 11, truthfully.
He probably also would have been far and away the best edge. I mean, I'm looking at the draft right now.
And that's the other thing.
Jalen Phillips, Kwity Paye, Peyton Turner,
Odafe.
Greg Rousseau, Odafe Owe, Joe Tryon, Shoyinka. Like, I mean, those were your first round edge rushers right there.
Yeah, he would have. I think he goes higher than you're giving him credit there. All right, last mailbag question here from Mr. Negative via Twitter. Long time, first time, love the pod. Since many fantasy football leagues are swapping over to auction-style drafting instead of snake, I'm curious what your thoughts on what the effects would be if NFL going from linear draft to auction, with worse teams being given more budget to bid on players. One I can think of is there would be less overpays / reaches, given teams would never pay more than market price for a given player. Also, follow-up is, what do you think the first couple picks would be worth given a 32-team league with each team having $100 to draft rookies? I love the idea. I think like the most fair thing for college prospects would honestly be if each NFL team had their, the rookie wage scale budget that they're given based on the picks they have. If each team could then just negotiate with the whole NFL and every team gets their budget, that their allotted money that they have for the picks that they came into the draft with, and then gets to negotiate and say, if you're Trevor Lawrence, you're going to command the Jaguars' entire budget. They can outbid everyone because they have the most draft capital, but it's all going to have to go to Trevor Lawrence because everyone else that's in the draft would bid up right to that brim, right to their max, because that's how good of a prospect guy like that is. But maybe this past year, where there is no Trevor Lawrence, all of a sudden, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the number one pick, maybe you're thinking, I'm going to spread my money out a bunch. I'm going to turn basically what I have that would be the number one overall pick draft capital into a bunch of like fringe first rounders because I got a bad roster that needs to be rebuilt, and pay a bunch of guys $4 million a year instead of Trayvon Walker, well over $10 million a year. So I think that would be a very interesting way. And again, be much more indicative of the value prospects brings to the table, honestly. I think you'd start to see it sort of approach like a PFF draft curve. So I think that would be sick. It's never going to happen unless like a rookie class holds out of signing with the NFL altogether and strikes. But yeah, unless that's the case,
it'd be a great spectacle too.
It would,
like how the NBA like promotes, like the draft lottery is like its own thing, like its own event. Like, and no disrespect to the NBA, but like with the way that the NFL can promote, I mean, shit, I think like the Hall of Fame game did more views than like the Stanley Cup Finals. So like, imagine what they could do with an auction style, right? Like if you made an event out of that,
it could be like a week.
Yeah,
long.
That would be crazy.
3 days, screw 3 days. They could drag that shit out for forever. It would be interesting. And yeah, like I said, what would the first couple of picks be worth if each team had $100 to draft rookies? It's going to depend on if the quarterbacks or not. I do think a lot of teams would start to realize that, like, they're given that strategy, or given being forced into that strategy, a lot of teams would start to realize, oh, I'd rather have two guys at one price than, if it's putting money on these guys' heads. That's a bad way to say that. I don't know why I said that. But putting money to these guys, putting your money where your mouth is when you're having to get these guys, instead of like putting draft picks to these guys. I think a lot of teams would have to realize, oh, I'd rather have, 4 guys at $20 than 1 guy at $85, which is why we say trade back. All right. That is your mailbag questions for the day. Thursday, we're going to do a college football preview, and we have a Luke Fickell interview. Fickell was awesome. I was obviously a UC hater after they beat Notre Dame last year. Probably still am. Not getting over anytime soon, but I'm buying Luke Fickell. That guy's the real deal. He had some great takes about analytics, great takes about building a program. That one's a must listen to. Like I said, I don't really care if you guys listen to the interviews. We put them in there because it's fun for me to talk to a lot of these people, and some of them are very, very interesting. You get some very, very good nuggets, but I hopefully give you guys enough before and after those interviews that if you want to skip them, by all means, that's your prerogative. There you have it. That's all for today's Talkin' Ball episode. We will be back on Thursday.